So likely what she'll miss is the
behave.
public meeting.
Yes, sir. Sir, yes, sir. 7 o'clock. Are we ready?
What do I gotta do?
It is 7 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order with Pledge of Allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And this evening, our clerk will again be late. So in the clerk's absence, would someone be willing to make a nomination or be willing to serve as secretary until her presence is here?
I'd like to nominate Trustee Thering for the
Support.
clerk.
Oh, I wanted to support that.
Don't delay on that.
Motion by Bills, support by Smith. Any discussion? Are you willing?
Yeah, sure.
Any other discussion? All in favor of Trustee Theron being our temporary clerk until our clerk arrives, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Congratulations, thank you.
Yep.
Would you be willing to do roll call of the board, please?
I would. Supervisor Milky,
Here.
Trustee Smith,
Here.
Trustee Bills,
Here.
Trustee Brown,
Here.
Trustee Thering, here. Kim and, Lisa is going to be just a little late.
Treasurer Rice, excuse.
Treasurer Rice is excused.
Thank you, clerk.
You're welcome.
I move to approve the agenda.
Support.
Motion by Bills, support by Smith. Discussion? Everybody saw my email today?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Yes.
So we're comfortable having that tabled issue go to the next meeting. Okay.
Yes.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve the agenda as presented, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Agenda is approved unanimously. Presentations on our agenda 5. We have none, but we do have this evening, item 6, public meeting, which is going to be start off with a presentation by Jennifer Hodges. Is that the right last name?
Jennifer Graham.
I go by both.
Jennifer Hodges Graham, do you do that too? No? Okay, Graham. My apologies. I was reading it rather than, yeah. With that, Mr. Stuhldrahr, do you have anything to introduce on this before our guest is given the floor?
I do not. We've just introduced her, and I think we're ready to
Okay.
roll.
And just for purposes of bookkeeping, we're considering this a public meeting at this point.
Well, thank you, Mr. Supervisor, for that introduction. I appreciate it. Again, I'm Jennifer Graham from Gordy Frazier. And tonight, some of this may seem slightly redundant. We've kind of gone through some introductions a couple months ago, and a lot of it's just in anticipation of where we're at right now. If you guys recall, I worked with staff to pull together an overall capital improvement plan with anticipation to start pursuing EGLE funding. And so this is step 1. I'll be back next month for the same similar song and dance on the water side. So tonight we're going to specifically talk about sanitary sewer. So just for some formalities, basically where we're at right now, just for recall, we had the overall consensus of this board that it was our intent to pursue EGLE Clean Water Revolving Fund for loan projects. And so our first step is we submit what's called a notice of intent. We did that back in November, and then following that point in time, we actually met with our grant loan administrator with EGLE. And so the next following step is where we're at is submitting what's called a project plan. And so that's what this document represents. I believe this is a document that has been made available to the public.
Correct.
And so we kind of went through this exercise. We did a formal advertisement to offer opportunity for the public to attend tonight, whether it's in person or via Zoom, also opportunity to submit any comments. And it is my understanding at this point we have not received any comments from the public, nor
That's correct.
which I just wanted to document. And I don't see anybody in attendance from the public here tonight aside from myself. Is that an accurate statement?
Anybody on Zoom?
Okay. Because that is one of the formalities when we submit this ultimately to Eagle, is they want to identify who's in attendance from the public, as far as, just for them when they want to move forward. It should we move forward with this project, so I guess it's me. But I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to review through this project plan. Basically what it is it's we've gone through this process before with other funding agencies, whether it's USDA, which was a component that funded the last wastewater treatment site, but they have a pretty defined manual as far as what the document needs to be comprised of. And so what I did was prepare this PowerPoint presentation just to kind of simplify it for everyone, for those of you that may want to have this something to share with your constituents and sewer customers. So moving into that, this is an overview of just the sanitary sewer system again, for introduction for everyone. And I'm happy to entertain any questions as we go through the process, but a couple of these items you guys have seen before. Now, as far as the project plan is concerned, when we've identified specific capital improvement projects, what we're looking for ultimately is an ability to demonstrate that the township has gone through the exercise to not only meet their existing demands, but their future growth demands, 10 and 20 years. That's what basically these tables depict. We've gone through, based on the reports that the township staff submit to Eagle, looking through what historical customers are, the number of customers, and what their discharge rates are, just to come up with projections for future growth. So at this point, I mean, the township, you guys have about 6,200 customers currently, and ultimately that shakes out to be about 200 gallons per day per customer, which is pretty consistent with industry standards. And so moving forward with that, that's what helps us ultimately dictate and look at wastewater plants and all the existing infrastructure capacities. Do we have the ability with the infrastructure we have to meet 10, 20-year average and peak hour demands? So that is a component in the report that we provide. And at this point, all the projections we're seeing, yes, looking at the wastewater plants, and then when we're sizing the similar pump station infrastructure, we want to make sure that we have the capacity to meet those demands. So this is just a quick highlight again of the Clean Water Revolving Fund, and ultimately this provides what the scope of the report itself needs to contain for Eagle to review and then make their determinations as far as if these projects meet their intent, they're eligible to be funded, and potentially make us eligible for grant money, depending on the scope, complexity, and median household incomes for this community. We did go through, during our notice of intent, we submitted to the state what is considered an overburden. And for Union Township, you guys did meet the demographic income data that demonstrated you did meet what's considered overburdened criteria, which does help us gain some extra points. I know you guys probably don't think that, looking at your community, but you guys actually did meet what's considered overburden status. So that helps. So with the report, some brief highlights that you'll see in this PowerPoint at this point is a description and need for the projects, alternatives that we reviewed, and ultimately what we recommended for alternatives, project financing, cost impacts to users, and then ultimately what social, environmental, and construction impacts and possible mitigation measures that we would do to overcome those impacts. So these probably two, I hope, look familiar to everyone on the sewer side. These are consistent with what the capital improvements we identified working with staff to just address our infrastructure. And the biggest thing, overall component of this, the township staff, they go through and they do a very detailed what's considered asset inventory. They have compliance with EPA, Eagle to go through. And so you guys, as you know, we maintain a very detailed in-depth GIS system, and along with that asset inventory of all your assets, replacement costs, and overall condition and rating of those. It's very impressive. You guys, your staff does an excellent job maintaining their infrastructure, so it's something to be very proud of. And through this process of the asset inventory, ultimately what we find is, you know, everything has a finite life expectancy. And so with this, these are the big critical components that we've identified and continue to identify in the capital improvement plans that can maintain, that are either aged or infrastructure that is nearing its life expectancy and needs to be replaced. And they're definitely critical components within either the plant or pump stations. So what we have specific to the wastewater plant, at the headwork side, and you guys have seen that coming in from the plant, the rotary screws you see, those are requested. Sludge storage tanks, and that's on the post-tertiary side, and they're big concrete tanks that after, we're discharging our effluent, we have solids that accumulate over time, and currently right now, we have one sludge storage tank on site. And I'll get into more details in a minute on that. Then the other two are related to pump station number 5 and pump station number 4 replacements. So the wastewater plant, I touched on in a minute. So there are currently 3 screw pumps at that plant, and basically how it's set up, just with anything else, redundancy and consistency for reliability. These pumps are rated for capacity to meet peak hour demand, and we want ability for if one fails, then we have second and third pumps to kick in and supplement. So GFA worked with DPW 2 years ago and put a third pump in that vacant channel, but now the 2 other ones are at or near their life expectancy, so you can kind of see the photo there. That's one of the components that's identified in this project, and again, it's because it's at or near its life expectancy. And then, as I said, after the screw pumps is the headworks building, right after that the screw pumps discharge into, and if you go in there, and I provided a couple pictures, everything goes through a screening process to remove debris, grit, sand, and right now we only have one. And so as you can imagine, that one gets heavily used, and when it is down for repair, right next to it is a manual screen, so that's what staff have to utilize. So what we're looking to do is actually, where that manual screen is, the chamber's there and available to plop in a new mechanical screen to help supplement the other existing one. Because the other existing one works great, it just gets heavily used. So that's where the redundancy component comes in. And then on the sludge storage tank side, as I touched on, right now, as the tank gets full, we're emptying it. We hire a contractor to come in and pump and properly dispose of it once a year. Well, as we continue to get more sewage flows and we get growth in the area, we constantly accumulate more sludge. And so an Eagle likes to see you doing it no more than twice a year. And so in planning for that, one of the things that we had committed to with Eagle looking into later than 2025 is to add another sludge storage tank, just so that the township continues to have more holding capacity. So we're not constantly paying a contractor to come in and pump them all. So there's some efficiency savings there. Anybody have any questions so far? Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, but when we went out there, I thought the sludge storage, I thought we gave that to the farmers, don't we? Or,
We do land application,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, there's proper disposal methods, but what we want to do is provide more storage so that we're not doing it as frequently, because the more you do that, it incurs extra costs for that pumping, hauling, and treatment. So we're still going to continue to grow that method with land application, but we don't have to do it as often. It's cheaper for us to continue to store it rather than do it 2-3 times a year.
and we have to pay for that, even though the farmers are getting it?
You do have to pay for it, yeah. There's a cost associated with it.
It's a bunch of crap. I think the farmers ought to pay for that. Well, the farmers are getting a benefit, okay.
Well, I'm sure, there's a discount with that route, but there's still a cost because they have to pump it out, fuel costs, and the contractor's the one doing it, so somebody has to pay the contractor for those fees.
Giddy up, okay, thank you very much.
Jennifer,
Yeah,
follow up on that, because I was going to ask why Eagle required not more than 2 times a year. Is it just a cost issue, or is there other reasons why they don't want you doing that frequently?
because bacteria grows in those, I mean, you can appreciate it's a bunch of solids, and
Yeah,
it's a caustic environment, and it's an environmental concern, because you're storing human solids in a tank. And that's their 10-state requirement, is no, you've got to have enough storage to empty it twice a year. Once you are having to empty it 3 or 4 times a year, then you need to have a secondary storage tank. So I can't, it's Eagle, I can't always, I can speculate what their thought
Okay.
is, but.
Okay, yeah, if you don't know, I was just kind of curious, but.
But I'm
Can-
imagining some of it, it's just because it's the type of waste we're talking about, and they don't wanna see, and it potentially, I mean, it generates heat. You know, there's a lot of things associated with that, just like, you know, farmers with chemicals storing on their facilities, is they don't wanna see stuff like that sitting for extended periods of time. Cause there's potential, if the tanks leak, you know, there's a lot of potential risks I can see, and that eats through concrete and steel, so,
Yes, microbial, right?
yes, yeah.
So you asked for questions. Can I go back to the
Yeah,
previous
please.
page? So when you were talking about the demand, the 200 gallons per customer per day, it mentioned that our maximum daily flow is 1.8 million roughly gallons per day. But if you look at the peak, and I'm not looking at the one with the star, but average peak of almost 2,000, that takes us to over that
Well,
one.
there's and I should clarify, max and peak hour are 2 different things. grabbed
I understand.
the- Yeah, I
But
grabbed,
you can correlate them by multiplying,
correct.
and you seem to do that so that, but it seems like the average peak exceeds that maximum flow that we're able to handle?
Yeah, so our wastewater plant is only required to be designed for average day. When we look at peak hour and max day, that's when we're looking at pump stations, you know, incoming, like the screw pumps. But the overall plant capacity, we just have to comply with average day.
So what happens though in those situations where the flow is a lot higher than the system's designed?
Well, you'd be looking, that's why we expanded the facility, if you recall, in, what, 2009, to
Mhm.
accommodate a higher average day demand. So we would be doing expansions. But as it stands right now, what I wanted to demonstrate with Eagle is we have a certain peak hour flow of, right now, if you just look at it, of like 1958, just as, or, yeah, as a number for peak hour. Our screw pumps are rated at 4 gallons per GPM, so we definitely have the capacity through those pumps to handle the peak hour. Did I answer your question right?
Yeah, well, my assumption that I'm getting from this is that the high average peak hour isn't something that sustains through an entire day, or
Correct.
the system itself would
Right.
not be able to keep up.
Right, and we're only worried about that when it comes to the headworks pumps. When it comes to the plant overall, we're looking at cumulative average day demands,
Okay,
and we're
that's helpful.
definitely well within that.
So in the future, if we're to have sustained high peak, that third screw really comes in handy then?
Yes, that's where the third one really comes in
Okay,
handy.
thank you.
Yeah,
That's helpful.
absolutely, yes.
And if one goes down,
Right.
which has occurred.
We don't fall behind.
Yeah.
It can happen, absolutely.
Thank you.
And then on the pump station side, pump station 4, located near Belmont National Drive, and then station 5 near Bilbray Lane. Those are 2 that are much like some of the other pump stations that we've worked with. We're doing pump station 1 currently right now and upgrading. A lot of it's stations again that are at or near their life expectancy, and so we're wanting to, they were put in 1979. So just to kind of date things, a lot of this, and there's been some upgrades over the years with respect to pumps and motors, but we're still talking, it's the same piping, the same valves. And these components are definitely ones that are at or near or beyond their life expectancy. And so again, it's a great testament that staff's done a wonderful job maintaining them, but we only have a certain amount of life left. And it's not, you know, any different than when we have to get a new car or, you know, things like that. Just had that discussion with my daughter. Pay for maintenance, or if you don't, it's gonna be worse, so. So with those 2 stations, we're looking at, you know, the concrete wet wells are gonna remain, but just the inside components, we're putting new control panels, new electrical, new SCADA, piping, valves, flow meters, just to bring it consistent and up to date with current standards, SCADA compatible, so that we have the ability to communicate with these, and pumps and motors, variable frequency drives, which definitely improves energy efficiencies. So all good projects. Now, just to, I mean, I know it's obviously stated, and in our minds, the need for the project, but just to kind of go through that exercise and again, have this PowerPoint available for anyone in the public that does show an interest. These are definitely projects that we recognize that it's a need. On the residential side, upgrading our stations, upgrading our wastewater plant. You know, you guys have made the commitment and investment to continue to provide quality sewer, and so this just continues and allows you the ability to keep providing that level of service to your customers. On the environmental impact side, you know, ultimately, if we don't manage our pump stations, there's potential for sewer backups, which could fall into people's homes. Same thing with the wastewater side. We don't add to improve our screw pumps and our screenings. You know, those can cause backups. We can send solids and sand and grit downstream into the plant that we don't want to do. Ultimately, and potentially impacts on our surface water discharge permit, which is something that we absolutely don't want to do with our discharge into the river. So, you know, everything that we do or don't do has real life impacts and implications. So to get into the actual plant upgrades themselves, we went through, and part of our responsibility when we're submitting these reports to Eagle is to identify alternatives for improvements. And of course, the most logical and easiest one is what we call no action. And it's pretty self-explanatory, we just don't do anything, and we wait till it fails. And the tone throughout the report is it's an option, but it's not a viable nor sustainable option in most of our opinions. So really, it doesn't have a lot of merit, and we don't really carry that through, but it is an option. So for the screw pump replacement, and actually it's the same for the fine screen and the additional storage, is we either implement those upgrades or we don't. Because if we were to look at, say, on the screen, for example, if we were to implement and install a different style of screen, the piping configurations and the plumbing that are at the plant start feasibly economical to do that, to the point where you'd have to basically reroute and install brand new piping and stations to accommodate the new screen. Same thing on the sludge storage tank. You build a tank or you don't build a tank. Screw pump replacement, the channels there, we either replace them or we put, you know, an on-site pump station in. But our argument with Eagle and working with staff as far as alternatives is, you know, it's extremely cost prohibitive to entertain another alternative. So that was pretty much the tone we had for the report related to the wastewater plant. On the pump station side, we went through the same exercise. Again, the no action alternative. And you can imagine what's going to happen ultimately with that. Alternative 2 is the preferred recommended alternative, which is to upgrade and rehabilitate the existing stations we have, utilizing the same wet well, just a matter of waterproofing, patching any concrete that's damaged, maintain the integrity of those concrete wet wells. But we did introduce a third alternative for consideration, just to review to see what impact it would have, which is to build a brand new station. We could abandon those in place, build new ones, but ultimately what we found, and you guys will see on the next slide, was it was extremely expensive to do that.
Yeah.
Challenging for property acquisition. And we went through that not that long ago with Station 1. And that was out of necessity to abandon that one just due to conditions and locations. But with these two alternatives, just the way they're set up, the size of them and the location, ultimately it was the most effective and efficient was to just do a replacement of them. Any questions? Okay. So what you see here is the real question everybody has is how much is it going to cost me? The nice thing is I mean, you guys have, everything you do is going to benefit your customer base. You guys do have a large customer base that can help share in those cost savings to provide upgrades to the project. So what you see on this table here is all the alternatives we recommended, and across the board, for convenience, they were all alternative 2 is how we lined them up. And so ultimately, the cost for all of those alternative 2s for our recommendation and review was just under $6 million. And that cost does account for engineering, construction fees, and to make it so ultimately $7 per quarter, just to make that clear. Do you guys have any, yes, Brian?
The construction costs that you have, are those reflective of like the inflation that's occurred over the past year and a half and your supply chain
Yeah,
and
it was,
labor and everything else?
and I do want to, so we worked originally with Kim on some preliminary cost estimates and capital improvement costs last year, and so this is substantially higher because we factored in knowing that what we're seeing for material shortages, understanding with these funding sources, there's a Build America compliant component, there's a Davis Bacon component, so we have built into them current prices plus a 20% contingency plus a 10% inflation factor
Okay.
to hopefully capture that, because what we're finding is when we do get these funds, we're still not utilizing them for a year to 2 years later. And it's, for all of us, it's frustrating, so, I know. And I'm sure, I hope I'm not off, but you don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
I'm assuming you built in some contingency at least, still.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Right,
saying.
yeah, right.
So it's close to 30%.
It was 20% contingency, then 10% cost
10%
increase.
inflation, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you said that and I missed it, huh?
No, that's
Oh,
okay.
okay.
It's okay, it's important enough to say it twice. Do you guys have any other questions on the cost?
Did we already pay off the debt from the initial upgrades when in 79 or whatever? Did we pay off all of that debt?
We paid off some, but there's still some debt on the books, correct? Can you describe that for me?
Well, there's debt from rural development. We're just talking about sewer, right?
Yeah.
So there's debt from rural development. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you how much is left. But there's two loans that rural development.
And then we're going for a 30-year loan? Or do we get to decide
You
that?
do.
Okay.
At some point, Eagle will come back and I'll kind of talk about that process in a minute.
Ah.
Right now, there are two viable options, and I did note that it's either 20-year at 1.875 or 30-year at 2.25. And that's when final projects come in, we'll work with Don Lund to see, ultimately what this board is amenable to.
Okay, I gotcha. That's kicking the can a little bit further, yeah.
And that's why we wanted to go this route. Kim and I had met, you look at this in comparison to current bond rates, it's,
Oh,
it's
You
still
can't.
very
Mhm.
manageable.
No.
Mhm.
And, and that's where we're seeing, a lot of people are applying for this, so. This is another slide that, Eagle wants to see, and when we submit it with our project plan, is just to address the project impacts mitigation. You guys have been through construction with us before, so I just wanted to clarify a couple things. Environmentally, we'll go through the environmental review process, NEPA, SHPO, just to make sure that any tree cutting we do off-season because they're spotted eared bats. There's the Mississauga rattler now. There's a couple new things. So we'll go through that process as mandated through Eagle, but ultimately, all this work is on township controlled property. So we're not having to get easements, get on private property for any of this work, so it's all manageable. It's outside environmentally sensitive areas such as floodplains or wetlands. So we definitely have some control of that, so a lot of it's just gonna be regulated through soil erosion and through Eagle. Same thing operationally, it's always our intentions, we want to keep the facility up and running without disruption of service, so it's a matter of staging and construction scheduling between the contractor and staff. And then social impact is ultimately them seeing an increase in user rates, is usually what we experience for social impact.
I'm sorry to go back a little bit, but is this a competitive application, or if you meet the qualifications, you're automatically enrolled into it and you can get the funding, or is there some sort of we may not get it type thing?
We may not. What we're experiencing, and we had talked about this probably before you were on the board, Brian, going through Eagle in general. So what Eagle has done in the last 2 years, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and their ARPA bill money, that's where they put all this money into, so clean water and drinking water. And so there's X amount appropriated, I can't remember the numbers, X amount appropriated for loan, X say. I can say on the sewer side, there was probably 30 applications and they ran out of money, loan money.
Mm.
So I anticipate those same people, there's about 10 of them that are gonna apply for this round again. So it's competitive, yes, but I think it's just a matter of how much money
Okay.
the feds and the state dump into it, and I'm constantly seeing, you guys probably see through some of your, emails that you get from, the state, that they're looking to continue to appropriate more
Oh,
funds
yeah.
into those.
Okay. Thank you.
So,
Appreciate it.
yeah. And then the last paragraph just talks about mitigation, which I touched on for a minute. I mean, as far as, social impact and mitigating for that, it's just a matter of public communication, what we're doing here tonight, making sure information is available to your public. So this last slide, I wanted you guys just for context, as far as scheduling is concerned. The blue stars indicate what we've done thus far. We've submitted our intent to apply, we've done a pre-application, and now we're at, the third step for doing our project plan. And then forthcoming is environmental reviews, some more paperwork with Eagle, and, but ultimately, we're looking for, funding in the third quarter. They break it up into different quarters, the state does, with intentions for a notice to proceed and closing on the loan in August of next year. During this time, since we put our notice of intent in, up until that time period, I mean, Eagle is completely agreeable to you guys moving ahead on projects, which you've already approved one of our contracts with Pump Station 5, so we can consecutively work on projects, knowing that we don't have this grant loan agreement in place, which is completely acceptable to them, because they don't want to hold up your project either. So we can concurrently keep working on projects as this time, we work through Eagle on this timeline. But this just kind of gives you guys an idea when we ultimately would know from Eagle what our terms are, and then a construction period of about 3 years thereafter. So they would want to see us complete with the project if we get favorable terms and agreement by May 2027. Forecast.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. So what we would be looking for to keep things moving forward, any comments, questions you guys have for me on here? Otherwise, we would engage in a public comment. And then I would be looking for, I think it's later on in the agenda, is that correct, Mark?
First action item.
For the resolution, if you guys concur with our recommendations to move forward. I have gotten comments back from both Mark and Kim on the project plan, and those will get incorporated. Nothing of substantial, I think, a couple grammatical clarifications on some schedule and timelines, but nothing that has any impact as far as costs or scope on the projects.
No, it was more in the area of, should we indicate in the plan, because there's some history in the plan, should we indicate certain things that we've done in the past? Because other times we did mention some things in the past. So the idea is, let's try to show Eagle we've been managing the system appropriately since its inception. Our intent is to keep doing it. Show them the maintenance that has occurred over some period of time, and to try to put our best foot forward in the application.
And include that article we got in that township issue, right? We got featured. Oh, but didn't we get featured? Our water system and everything got featured in that MTA, what, a year and a half ago? I'm just making, I was just joking. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. We were part of an article, though. And
Yes, I know.
it wasn't this topic, but
Yeah.
But yeah, so once I incorporate those comments, any comments you guys have, we're gonna be submitting it electronically to May 1st.
Excellent.
With resolution and meeting minutes, and we'll keep plugging away. So I appreciate everyone's time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tara, do we have anybody?
No.
Thank you. So at this point, we'll open up public Q&A, but as I understand it, we have no one, maybe I'm providing the feedback, Nick. As I lean closer, I'm,
Maybe I got it turned down.
okay.
It's still going, it's just low enough that you can't hear it.
Every once in a while, just a little bit. But being that we have nobody in the virtual room, apparently there's no public questions and answers. I'll ask the board, though, if there's any questions now that you want to ask before we get moving on our agenda.
No.
Just to comment briefly, and it was mentioned during the presentation, but in the main, this is about risk management. And so that involves redundancy. It involves avoidance of larger costs down the road and what could be considerably larger costs, both financial and reputational and a variety of others that I could list off. Jeopardy, putting the permit in jeopardy, environmental impacts. So those are the kind of things that these type of programs are all about. You have all read various almost catastrophic events that have occurred in municipal water and wastewater systems, both here in the state, water and wastewater, and around the country. And we just prefer to not be part of that list. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to item 7 on our agenda, public comment. Public comments restricted to 3 minutes regarding items on this agenda. If you choose to address the public, please state your name and address for the record. Still no one in the,
Still not, but did you close, question and answers for?
I didn't close it, but I guess for the record, it's closed at 7:36. And seeing no questions or answers. With that, though, we'll open up public comment at 7:37 PM. No one coming forward. We'll close public comment at 7:37. That brings us to item 9, as we have no business for item 8 on our agenda. Report boards and comment. Item A, current list of boards and commissions. All I'll point out again is the sidewalk committee. I believe we might have had an applicant for that. It came from the EDA meeting.
Dr. Chowdhury.
Oh, I was thinking someone else, too.
I haven't received one.
Well, I'll send you an email. I had someone that desired to sign up, and I'm surprised that they didn't at this point. So I'll follow up with them and see if they can also apply. I'm assuming no appointments have been made at this point? Okay. So we still have that open seat. Everybody saw the April monthly activity report. Any questions or comments on that?
No.
I missed you coming in, clerk. That takes us to item 9C, Planning Commission EDA Sidewalk CBA updates by our Community and Economic Development Director, Mr. Nanny. You have the floor.
Thank you. We had a couple meetings that you mentioned. Both our EDA board and our planning commission have met. Both on April 18th, our EDA board heard the presentation, the end presentation from Jim Bryan of the Michigan Development Corporation. That had been postponed a couple of times on Jim's behalf, and he was able to come and give that presentation. There's been some copies of their annual report here in the boardroom. The other item that was on their agenda was to start the conversation about the irrigation system. The EDA board funds the East EDA district and irrigation along the margin of East Pickard Road of 20, much of which is being impacted by the current construction. A large chunk of that system was removed to put in a temporary traffic lane on the north side. Even on the south side, a good chunk of that system has been damaged by various utilities, changing out, moving things, and such. So the system largely within the construction zone is going to have to be So we had Randy Char from Teal and Turf Irrigation was here, and had a good conversation with the EDA board about options. And we're going to be looking for more information from Randy at our June meeting on that topic. Just to bring back some things from the EDA board to just consider. The Planning Commission had one business item on their agenda. It's what they've not had before. We have several types of site plans that the current ordinance allows for. Typically, what's called a preliminary or final site plan goes to the Planning Commission. That's for a new development project, typically, or very a substantial addition, such as what's going on right now with the Maury Courts facility where they're building the gymnastics addition. But we also have what's called a minor site plan application. That's actually an administrative approval process. This was for smaller projects, parking lot expansions, small additions, various sorts that we can review and take care of administratively. In this case, we had one. It was a minor site plan application for an industrial building on Independence Drive, to the south of us. They were building a small addition. Normally, it's administrative review, but we do have the sidewalk and pathway ordinance. And any time that a project is subject to site plan approval, it brings in that requirement for construction of sidewalk. Independence Drive is an area that doesn't have sidewalk. There's no sidewalk in the vicinity there. The applicant was interested in asking for the temporary waiver from construction that we have a policy for. That's something that requires a planning commission action. So that was what was on the agenda. The site plan would be was ultimately approved administratively by our zoning administrator, but the temporary relief from construction of the sidewalk was reviewed by the planning commission. They ultimately granted that project. So the other item on their agenda was the master plan update, just getting started in that process. This meeting was primarily to talk about kind of broad areas of interest, broad areas to focus on. There was a good bit of discussion about the agricultural community, and also a good bit of discussion about economic development and housing. Those are all key pieces of discussion going forward. So the commission did kind of identify and agree on a set of broad areas that focus areas for the plan, which are in the minutes for the meeting. And going forward from there, we begin to flesh out that kind of that skeleton and look at exactly how we'll proceed with the various pieces of the puzzle for our updated plan. So with that, we have to answer any questions.
Why was the sidewalk waiver granted? I thought that was supposed to not be done anymore.
So we have a policy, and that policy was adopted in 2018, and it was updated a year and a half ago or so. But that policy allows for temporary waiver of sidewalk construction in certain instances. And the policy lays out those circumstances where it's appropriate to consider that. One of those circumstances is the property in an industrial district. That if it is an industrial district, then a waiver can be granted. It's temporary relief. It's not really a waiver, it's temporary relief that can be called in the future. In this case, the project really qualifies for that reason. That is an industrial area. It also qualifies because there are no existing sidewalks in that area at all. There's no plan to add sidewalks in that immediate area. So for those reasons, but primarily because it's an industrial district, the planning commission found it was consistent with the policy that was adopted.
So then there's no plan to actually make them construct a sidewalk.
Well, if the circumstances are such that the sidewalk is needed, let's say, for example, sidewalk is constructed down that stretch of Lincoln Road on the east side, and then into Independence Drive, then we certainly could call in that request and have that section installed, as we've done in a few other cases. But for the moment, there is no option. The other thing that could happen is if that policy changes. One of the topics in the planning commission is interested in talking about the master plan. is to look at non-motorized transportation and see if there's something we need to do from a policy point of view, from a long-range land use plan perspective. The consensus, I think, of the commission was to look at bringing that sidewalk, that temporary relief policy into the master plan to make it part of the plan itself. And in doing that, they changed what those priorities are.
Thank you.
So, do you happen to know if Jim McBride from MMDC plans to come to the Board of Trustees at all? Do we know that?
He will be.
He will be.
He was at the city earlier this week. I don't have him on the calendar yet, but he will be.
He's planning on it. Okay, at this point. Okay. Good. I don't want to steal his
He
thunder.
comes
Otherwise,
every
I
year.
was going to share some of the points that he lifted up in our EDA meeting because they're worthy to hear. But I'll let McBride do that when he comes, so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie.
If I may just comment briefly on the sidewalk waiver business. There have been waivers granted in the past, and the Board of Trustees has also taken action in the past to call in that waiver. And we've executed that in the past as well. So I think to your point, everybody, including the Planning Commission, understands the Board of Trustees' priority vis-a-vis sidewalks. And the policy, in addition to talking about where waivers are allowed to be considered, there are other areas in the policy where they're not allowed to be considered. Thank you.
And I think my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I heard from this board before was, in the event there are waivers, such as we had on Remus, that if there's enough other sidewalks built in the area that you can have some continuity, that would be a logical time to call those waivers in.
Yeah.
Rather than having a single sidewalk to nowhere on both sides, you wait until it seems more appropriate. I think that was kind of the intent. All right, that takes us to board member reports. Item 9D on the agenda. I'll look to trustee Thering.
Actually, I think I'm good. Yeah, where you guys actually had the discussion. It was a good question on the sidewalks. If you kind of go out there, if you could look and see what's there, it would make more sense. And I like the ability that we have, the ability to call it in when it's appropriate. So there's just certain areas. If there was another section of sidewalk, I think we wouldn't have given that waiver, because then that, we have a connection, but there's just absolutely nothing there. But it's a great question to ask.
Clerk Cody?
At the last road commission meeting, they approved the gravel road contract.
Nothing tonight?
Trustee Bills?
I have a few things because I forgot my notes from the last time, so I'm sorry, but anyway, on April 4th, sorry about the tardiness of this report, I attended the Isabella County Board of Commissioners meeting, and it was very interesting because they had a representative from the Michigan State University Extension, and they gave an update on the dairy section of it. And so we had, let me get her name. She's really good. She's the educator from the MSU Extension. Her name's Cora Ekema, and she also is at the Grins Or Dairy in Blanchard. That's what her family owns, and she gave you stats. Basically, I wanted to go over the Isabella County milk sales were the highest category for animal products sold in Isabella County at $37 million worth.
Wow.
And that Isabella County has the 15th highest milk production by county in the state, and that we have 36 licensed dairy farms, and this is the best one. Michigan is ranked #1 in the nation in milk production per cow and 6th for total milk production, which I realize now that that's because they treat their animals well and they feed them well. So, I mean, if you don't get that kind of production. That's what she kind of explained to us. So that was really, really cool. And I thought it's good to be proud of our farmers. All right?
Eat that, Wisconsin.
Giddy up. Also, they wanted everybody to know that the soil and test kits are available. They're $26 for the residential and $18 for commercial. They're at the office. And then that the sheriff's office broke ground last week of March, and so they're moving right along and spending a lot of money. And they approved the youth garden summer community project, so they're going to get the kids to plant stuff, you know. And then they also approved the meth and opiate addiction course, which is a 150-day course and includes counseling and courses for to reform addicts. Also, the sheriff mentioned that he moved his patrols for the Isabella County Farm Youth and Farm Fair to 8 p.m. to midnight in order to catch the rowdy crowd, so that he could mitigate the issues that happened last year. And he also they needed an equipment shelter for all that new radio equipment it'll go through all the buildings and everything that they're upgrading for millions of dollars. They needed a $400,000 building to house this, but consumers happen to have an old shed that, I don't know what it is, but it's like, they're selling it for $1. So all we have to do is move it, and it'll cost like $30,000 to move it. So they saved, almost $400,000. So that was good. That's all for that meeting. And then we had the 18th, the Board of Commissioners meeting. They announced that COVID is over as of May 11th, and that they kept track of all their expenses in case that there's additional funding. Approved the equalization report. They accepted the Isabella County Planning Commission annual report and wanted to let us know that they had a solar update in that annual report, and that they did a post-construction sound study on the windmills, and there were 14 sites tested, and they had to record data for a long, they hired an intern to do all this recording and everything, but that they are all in compliance at max power. So in case anybody asks or says something bad about the wind turbines, they are in compliance. And something I thought this was really cool too, that they have a rental contract with Ellen's Equipment over there in, I believe, McBain. That's where I know them from. That's for the next 3 years, and they get a brand new tractor with a backhoe for their parks and rec for $15 an hour for the next 3 years, and that is like an unbelievable. They get a brand new one every year, so that's pretty sweet that Ellen's Equipment does that for them, and maybe we should see if they want to do it for this government too. I don't know. And then also Miklos Ferber, who is one of the was he a previous I don't know, he was an official, a building contractor, but he's going to volunteer to be involved in the construction of the jail, and he's going to be advising them for free, volunteer. So that was really nice of him to do.
Miklos Ferber?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I believe the administrator said that he also was intimately involved in the construction of another building that maybe the downtown building.
Commission on Aging.
Oh, commission. Oh, thank you
Wow.
very much. Thank
I only
you.
know him personally. I
that's
didn't
what it was.
know what he did in his professional life. So interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's semi-retired, I think, now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so now to the good one. So, Wednesday, April 19th at 7 o'clock, we had an MTA meeting with the county at their request. They wanted to have everybody there. I don't think anybody else was there from Union Township. I didn't see any of you guys there. But their 10-year forecast, as I've mentioned previously, puts them at a deficit in the next 4 to 5 years. They're going to have a $4 million per year deficit for the next foreseeable future. And they have a $20 million unfunded balance in MERS, and it just got worse because, you know, they didn't make any money last year and lost money. So that's the Michigan, or Municipal Employees Retirement System, in case anyone doesn't know that. So now, basically, the dealio is, you can't exceed 15 mils taxable, mills on your tax bill for the county, including the townships, including the schools, township, the county, and RESD in Gratiot. So they're saying they're going to request an additional 3 mil. So they have to get a committee. There has to be a committee, and the county commissioner will be on that, the treasurer, ISD, a resident at large, and a city official, which will be appropriated or appointed by a probate judge, and township supervisors. So, or a township supervisor. So they currently have 6.6 mils, which was allocated to them some 40 years ago, and they have not got an addition to that, but they have split off a lot of things like the ICTC, the Parks and Rec got their own mill, the libraries got their own 1.75 mils. So those special elections all increased their budget overall quite a bit, but they want more. And I did ask quite a few questions. I wanted to make sure that, see, $4 million is really only about 4% of their budget, maybe even 4.5%, but it's not 50%. So I said, you know, why are you asking for 3? And she said, well, we won't use it all. But I guess that's what somebody pointed out, that they said that about the library too, but the library immediately used the entire 1.75 mil. So just so you can update your constituents, this is going to be a big tax increase, huge. So I thought that was important to discuss. That's all I've got.
I thought, and maybe my memory's wrong, that their MERS liability was, they were going to get past that in the next calendar year.
No, and they're using all of their ARPA money to supplement at $1 million a year. Yeah, they're using all of their ARPA money to just stave off their deficit. And their windmill money, which is $1 million a year too. And they also get that opioid money, which is close to $1 million for the next 16 years, I think. So they're using all of that additional money.
That
It's
money's
temporary.
earmarked, I'm assuming, for specific uses, right? The opioid.
Not at this time.
Okay.
They say it will be, but I don't know that yet. Till it is, it isn't.
I love your reports.
Thank you, sir.
So that puts a lot of pressure on trustee
Oh,
Brown.
I will never live up to that. Went to a regular Mount Pleasant Commission meeting Monday, April 24th, 7 p.m. Just a couple quick things. I did get to enjoy the 2022 annual report by Jim McBride, Mid-Michigan Development Corporation. I look for him to come in here and give him the same report. It was a good report. Also, there was a public hearing. They want to move forward on public gathering spaces initiative for the grant for that downtown area. I believe it covers Broadway Central and Parking Lot 3, I believe they call that area right down in there. So the plans, they have some initial plans, and it did pass. So they will be moving on that grant for that proposal for the initiative for the gathering space downtown. Also, they considered adoption of their 2024 goals and objectives, and that also passed. And then they, of course, they went into a work session from there for their capital improvement plan for 2024-2029. Couple other things I want to just touch base on, just notes for just the community. And I hope I have these dates right, because I wrote them down real quick while
while they were going through them, but May 20th at the fairgrounds, I believe there's an e-waste pickup for electronics. That's May 20th. And then I believe Isabella Bank and Trust on May 16th at the South Mission Branch from 10 a.m. to 12 a.m., or till noon, excuse me, 10 a.m. till noon. They're going to have free shredding. That's May 16th, the South Mission Branch from 10 a.m. to noon. That's my report.
I have one more thing. I forgot.
Trustee Bills?
The dairy educator, also mentioned that there's going to be, if you are interested in seeing a dairy farm, on Saturday, July 29th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., breakfast on the farm with a farm cooked pancake breakfast served from 9 a.m. to noon at DeGrin's or Dairy in Blanchard. And that's a good time to learn anything you want to know about dairy. That's all.
Thank you. I'm going to only add one thing to Mr. Nanny's, and you may have mentioned it, and if you did, my apologies. I know you talked about the irrigation system. Did you mention the lights on the south side?
I did not.
So the other thing that's happening with the MDOT project that's on 20 there, originally they're putting in a temporary lane on the north side, so we had to take out all the lights and the irrigation. So all those lights were put in storage. Well, it turns out that the lights that are on the south side, the footings weren't done properly. If you want more details, talk to Mr. Nanny. But essentially, it was recommended that we redo the footings for those, so we'll go ahead and take those out as well. And those lights will go in storage as well. And so those are all being redone.
Okay.
Did I describe that okay? Yep. With that, let's move to consent agenda, item 10 on the agenda. Who had warrants?
I did warrants and everything looked good.
Any motions related to consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Support.
Motion by Bill, support by Smith. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to new business, item 11 on our agenda, A. Consideration to approve a resolution in support of the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund project plan. Mr. Stuhldreher, do you want to introduce this at all?
Thank you. I just want to point out that there's a staff report on this item on page 27. You also had Ms. Graham's presentation a few minutes ago. The resolution in question that we're asking you to consider for adoption is on page 30. I think if your motion is as described on 29, page 29, that will cover it from a technicality perspective. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for our manager? I just have the one, and maybe it was in the notes, but I didn't see it. So this is coming before us a little quicker than we had expected initially, right?
About a month, maybe.
About a month?
Yeah.
And that's just because Eagle moved up the requirements? Or the timing
Eagle
of-
moved up the requirements. They were a little discreet on how they announced those. We do monitor them, but moved it up a month.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Make a motion approval of the resolution adopting a final project plan for the wastewater systems improvements through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, CWSRF, and designating Kim Smith, Public Service Director, as the authorized project representative.
Support.
Motion by Brown, support by Bills. Any discussion? Roll
It's a
call.
needed project, and I think, we need to do it.
Agreed. And I want to thank Jennifer and her staff, or staff that work with you, maybe is a better way to put it, and the staff and the staff here as well, because I know a lot went into this and will continue to be put into this. So,
I appreciate the communication, Jennifer, that you offer throughout this process. Thank you.
My
Very,
pleasure.
very thorough.
Thank you.
Yes, very thorough.
Seeing no further comments, Clerk Cody, would you do a roll call on the motion to approve the resolution adopting final project plan for wastewater system improvements?
Supervisor Milky,
Yes?
Trustee Smith,
Yes.
Trustee Bells,
Yes.
Trustee Brown,
Yes.
Trustee Thering,
Yes.
and Clerk Cody, yes.
Motion passes unanimously, if I heard that correctly. That takes us, thank you again. That takes us to 11B on our agenda, consideration to amend language to clarify the definition of policy governance 3.3.1. This comes out of comments that I had made, I think, 2 meetings ago, just regarding making sure that our behavior towards other boards is consistent with how we behave with with the township staff and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a very minor word addition to the policy. So, Mr. Stuhldreher, do you have anything that you need to add to this?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. So with that, you've seen the language change. Opening up for discussion, or?
I move to approve an amendment to policy governance 3.3. Well, it just says 3.3 on the request.
You want the one there?
Okay.
That works.
Thank you.
Support.
Motion by Bill, support by Brown. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to approve the change to 3.3 policy governance, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. That brings us to item 11C on our agenda, Policy Governance 2.5, Quarterly Financial Conditions and Activities. Mr. Stuhldreher, this is your wheelhouse. You have the floor.
Thank you. And the staff report begins on page 33 of your agenda packet. 2.5, Financial Conditions and Activities. This is a review that we do quarterly. The policy is fairly lengthy. I'm not going to go over it all. The top line policy statement says that with respect to the actual ongoing financial condition and activities, the township management team shall not cause or allow the development of fiscal jeopardy or a material deviation of actual expenditures from board priorities as established in your INS policies. There are additional limitations placed on the management team that are articulated through the balance of the policy, such that we're required to maintain adequate cash flow. We are required by policy to make sure our tax payments and other payroll-related tax payments, for instance, are made timely. We're not allowed to expend more funds than have been received in the fiscal year. There's limitations on incurring debt of any type. There's a policy statement about the use of long-term reserves, and all designed to make sure we're paying attention to the financial condition of the township, both current and in the future. My interpretation of this policy is several things. One, that no expenditures will be made or incurred that exceed the budget unless it's an emergency purchase, which are articulated in other policies throughout the document, where I'm allowed to authorize certain purchases. You can read 2.5.6 if you're interested in that. All tax payments to other governmental entities are to be paid in accordance with state statute. Payrolls be paid, and accounts payable invoices are processed timely. This may sound like minor things to policy-making boards and the public, but they're really critical to the organization. They're real nuts and bolts that, if are not spinning properly, the whole house comes crashing down. Justification for that this interpretation is reasonable. The board approves the budget annually per our style of governance. The board sets policies at whatever level they deem comfortable, and then they turn it over to management to execute that policy. There are several financial reports in the within the staff report that you can look at, budget actuals primarily. And I can state affirmatively that no debt was incurred, no long-term reserves were accessed, all payroll payments to various taxing authorities were made timely. There were no purchases greater than $10,000 that were not either first approved by the board in the past or that I failed to notify the board when those were occurring. So from my perspective, the management team is in compliance with the policy. Be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Seeing no questions, then, do you feel the report was submitted when it's due based on our calendar?
Yes.
Yes. Did this report lay out the manager's interpretation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Any issues with that interpretation?
No.
Is it reasonable?
No.
Is it justified and reasonable? I guess the same question. Does the interpretation address all aspects of the policy as stated?
Yep.
Yes.
And then using the data, do you feel we're in compliance based on that data?
Yes.
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 All right, so comments regarding further policy development.
Looks good to me.
I had one to add, maybe.
Okay.
So see what you think. What I was looking for in here is long-term. And I know Trustee Smith has brought this up in the past as well, but a lot of this is focused on the near term. Payroll, looking at cash flow, those types of things. But there's nothing in here indicating that we need to keep our eye on the long term. And I don't know how to articulate that, but we've and I don't think we're in jeopardy of that, and I think the staff does a great job of informing us of long term. But it would be reasonable to have as part of our policy, I think, to say that the operation should be always looking at the long term as well. And I want to know, go ahead.
Could you say that it's just being done through the budget process when he's doing the 10-year?
I thought about that when he was mentioning that we review the budget process.
Because it's kind of reviewed on a every year basis. I just wonder if let's keep track of the long term, but I just wonder maybe every quarter's too often, that if we do it annually through the budget process, would
Yes.
be sufficient.
But I think
Make note of it.
my
that-
expectation is the policy would state that in the budget process.
Okay,
maybe that
so
we
that's
do
what- okay.
That annual review.
I'm sorry, I misinterpreted. what
Well,
you were getting
I
at.
wasn't suggesting a tighter schedule than that.
Yeah,
But that
okay.
it formally state that that is expected, and it has been
It
done.
has, okay.
Yep.
I agree with that.
I like the long term. I mean, when I started looking at the Isabella County, with the addition of Administrator Frost, she started doing 10-year projections, and I really think that's important.
Yeah, and our manager's been doing that too, and I'm not trying to indicate to the public that that's not being done. Just, I would like to see this stated in the policy that continue, right?
Fine by me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mr. Stuhlbar, do you feel you heard that well enough to maybe draft a short sentence to that effect?
Yes, I did. And the first thing I'm going to do is review the existing policy because something tells me that something to your
Is in there.
effect is in there. But I'll report back or add something in the appropriate place.
And-
It may not be in this exact spot, but
Okay. And just for clarity too, I didn't look through the rest of the policy to see if it was covered somewhere else in some way. I was focused on this 2.5 section. So with that, unless there are objections, we'll move on from that. That takes us to Policy Governance 2.6, Asset Protection. Mr. Stuhldreher, again, your wheelhouse.
thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
The report on this begins on page 52 of your agenda packet. Title of the policy is Asset Protection, which I think is timely based on our presentation earlier tonight, because it's all about protecting existing assets. The wording in the policy is that the township management shall not allow corporate assets to be unprotected and inadequately maintained or unnecessarily risked. And again, there are 11 or so sub-policies within this that further restrict management's authorities. We are not to subject plant and equipment to improper wear and tear or insufficient management, for instance. We should be operating with proper risk management techniques to allow for continuous operations and services. We should be avoiding and not allowing unnecessary exposure of the organization, the staff, or the board to claims of liability. We are to keep ourselves insured as appropriate. There's some language about how the purchase of assets are to be handled, both from the perspective of staff and the board, dealing with avoiding conflicts of interest or acknowledging them when they exist, and not allowing that to come into the purchasing process. There's some language about that we invest our idle cash. There's an investment policy that governs how that is to be done, and there's state statutes that governs how that is to be done. All in the goal of which is to avoid loss of liquidity, loss of the capital itself that's invested. There's statements in here about our public image and credibility that we are to be protecting and avoiding things that may damage that, and also a statement about seeking to always be looking at best practices and implementing those types of things as and when appropriate. I interpret this policy that to mean that we need adequate theft and casualty insurance, that we're properly maintaining our equipment per maintenance schedules, that we keep our books in a manner that is consistent with auditing and accounting and state treasury standards, that we follow reasonable procurement practices. I think that's a reasonable interpretation based on the policy itself. I think the policy is pretty well written. It's hard to not understand what it says, and it doesn't leave a lot of room for interpretation. So there's a bit of data that's associated with this report. There's a copy of our insurance certificate in here that demonstrates that we do have coverage. The quarter-end investment portfolio is contained in your report. So we are fully insured. We did have, related to that, a risk control site visit done back in December, and we're reviewing the results of that report, and we'll implement things that we feel are appropriate and make sense for us. We do quite a bit of training throughout the township, both at the public services level and within the, I'll call it the more office level. So we're paying attention to our employees and by, I think, extension, the community safety when we're down, whether it's digging in a hole or going through processes such as a site plan approval process where we need to be cognizant of things like image and other aspects of ordinances such as the zoning code. There's training that we do a lot for BS&A, which is our, what I call our back office suite of modules that cover payroll, taxation, assessing, accounts payable, the general ledger, that whole back office business. We go through a lot of training on that. We try to create redundancies where we can through cross-training. We are sending 2 of the front office staff personnel out to receive some basic assessing training so that they can be properly credentialed to answer appropriate questions for that level of training at the front office so that they don't have to wait or go back for the, try to meet with the assessor. We do a lot of testing monthly by staff in here, making sure exit lights work, emergency lights work. We perform computer backups nightly. We test them 2 or 3 times a year to make sure they actually work. You'll see the report shortly in the next month as it relates to FY22, but in FY22 we received a very good audit report for the fiscal year 2021. There were no items of, I don't recall what exactly they call them, management comments or something like that. There were none of those. So taken together, and I think as I mentioned at the start, the work that we always do and are looking into the future to be able to keep doing as it relates to the water and sewer utility, you can sum it all up. It's about risk management. So that's all I have. Be happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Seeing no questions, report submitted on time.
Yes.
Do you feel the manager's interpretation is reasonable
Yes.
Yes.
and justified based on our policy, right?
Mhm.
Do you feel the interpretation addresses all aspects?
Yes.
Yep.
All the aspects I can think of.
Yeah, and then some.
Yeah.
And compliance, you feel we're in compliance?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Any areas regarding the policy that you feel are not clearly addressed or that need to be added?
That's a big premium.
Lot to insure.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
A lot of good stuff to ensure.
Yeah.
Yes.
When I was reading through this, I think of water and sewer in general. That's, I mean, there's a lot of assets that the township has. Those are our most expensive items. But I was beginning to really think about the IT side of things, and it's covered generally in 2.6.7, but obviously, malware threats, those types of things.
Well, I think with CMS though, taking over the server, doing the new servers and everything, that's pretty good protection right there, don't you think?
Yeah, so I'm not suggesting that. I was looking for that because our policy doesn't specifically, since I come from the IT world, doesn't specifically say it, but it certainly comes out of 2.6.7, and the data showed that. So I think our staff almost stops the board from making the wrong decisions about our sewer and water. I mean, because they keep us so informed about what's going on, and you can tell that the staff care about those assets tremendously. That comes through, I think, in all the activities that we have in those areas. That's certainly appreciated. Any other comments?
Yeah, for sure. We've had the privilege of going out to the wastewater treatment plant and seeing what the staff does and how clean it is. And you heard Jennifer Graham mention just this point in her speech here about our asset protection, how awesome it is, and how well our facilities hold up for as many years they do, and how well the staff and takes care of that. So when you hear an outside source come in and give us the thumbs up on that, I think it just comes right back to this to show that we are definitely in compliance up and beyond, and the staff does a tremendous job. We see that. I wish we could give the tour to the public to see exactly what they have out there and what they're paying for, because Union Township takes care of their facilities.
Yeah, certainly proud.
Yes.
Very proud.
We're good?
Yes, sir.
Moving on, 11E, again, policy governance 3.4, agenda planning. Bear with me. This is kind of more in our wheelhouse. Do you have anything you want to add, Mr. Schulbreyer?
I do not, thank you.
Okay. So you've read through the policy?
Oh, yeah.
So as far as being in strict compliance with this policy, how do you feel we're doing?
Well, it talks about agenda planning. Our policies inform how to do the agenda planning, but you are in charge of that, right? So, right?
Well,
Setting the agenda.
Not so much. I mean, the staff will often bring stuff to us. On occasion, for example, the clerk's office resource. I requested that be put on based on input from this board. So I largely take it from here or something that comes up on the journey. I mean, we all have the ability to try to add something to the agenda, right?
Okay, that's pretty much.
Any two trustees can
Thank you.
ask something.
That's more like it.
Yeah. But this speaks a lot about our annual agenda, right? And I think I didn't feel we were fully in compliance with 3.4.2. At least I don't think we've done this very well in the past. 3.4.2 talks about consultations with selected groups in the ownership or other methods of gaining ownership input will be determined and arranged in the third quarter to be held during the balance of the year. We're going to obviously always do better reaching out to more ownership, but I don't really have a consistent memory of this being an agenda item that we actually lay out, how are we going to do this, right, in
I
the third
agree.
quarter. So I think we've failed at that.
Yeah, I brought that up a few times. I agree. We don't do that.
And I think we failed at the subsequent one, 3.4.2.2, for the same kind of reason where we don't follow that calendar and make it a priority. And I think we can be much better at that.
In what way? how can we do that?
Well, that's a good question, because that's one of the things we're supposed to ask of ourselves, right? Is how do we improve that? I mean,
Should it start sooner than June?
do we do it in June?
No.
Okay, so you're just
I don't
asking the
really
question.
think- Yeah, I don't really think so. No.
Yeah, I mean,
But
did we
we're
last?
also working on it, you know. It's not like we're not doing something.
Agreed. I just don't think it's not a formal process that we go through in June that says this is how we're going to.
Right.
What
if it's-
we're gonna
if it's
go after, and this is
policy-
what-
If it's policy,
Right.
we should have something in place.
So it's, once again, aren't you, and don't you wanna put that on the agenda then?
I think we do.
We
That's what I'm
do
saying.
put it on the agenda?
Well, it says we're supposed to, right? I just saying I don't think it has been done. Not in a real formal way.
Can I comment?
Yes, please.
The, as it relates to first, as it relates to 3.4.2.1, don't forget you do hold your joint meeting every year, and that's specifically to try to get ownership input. They're owners, they represent a certain segment, so you do that. So don't say you don't do anything. Trustee Thering has brought it up before. Putting some of this technology in here is a way that you have tried to do more in efforts to outreach to your owners. Yes, you can only do more. You can always do more. As it relates to 3.4.2, there has not been anything done in that area. And I'm aware of that. And I think that I can help you all better adhere to this policy by getting the right kind of folks in here at the right time to speak to you about what may be off the wall. Have any of you ever heard of futurists speak? It's interesting, and it's kind of fun, and it's intellectually stimulating, but those kind of conversations, and we have CMU right here, 25, 50-year demographic items. That's all the type of information that could really help a board, any board, a board like this, that needs to be thinking about the future. And we talk a lot about policy and keeping our heads up and out. I think getting some folks here could really help that. Now, that's less about owners, it's more about what do people that think about these kind of things have to say about what the place is going to look like in 40 years. And so, thank you.
So I wasn't suggesting that we don't talk about this, because we talk about ways to reach out to ownership in new ways, other ways. There are things that we do, as the manager said, as you said in the past, I mean, there are things that we do. What bothered me, I guess, about this policy is it says, essentially, methods of gaining ownership input will be determined and arranged in the third quarter.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we fail. It is not a third quarter thing where it's intentional. I think the way we do it is much more of we talk about it often.
Yeah, I think it should be something more formal, but we do talk about things that we're doing now, things that we'd like to see, but to make it more of a formal
But
The
that
policy says third quarter.
Yeah,
But that would also tie in with your budget process as well. So
Right.
stuff that we want to see on the agenda most likely is going to be something that we're going to want in the budget as well. So it kind of makes sense to have that all kind of tied into the ends, the budget and the agenda planning. It's all kind of very tightly connected.
You're right, and last year we requested money be put aside for surveys in the budget process, which is a way to reach out to ownership. But it wasn't done in a formal
Third quarter.
mechanism, third quarter, this is what we're looking at. What I was questioning really was how this policy is stated. Is it the best way for us to accomplish what I think we all want, which is always looking at better ways to reach out to ownership?
or should it be reworded?
Right. I think the idea here is good.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm not suggesting a change at this point, but as I looked at it, I thought, we're not in compliance with that, but we do think about this all the time.
So like the cycle, instead of will start in June, the cycle will start in at the beginning of the budget process or something like that. Kind of gives you a little bit more flexibility that there's not a hard date. It's just that when we start talking budget priorities for the following year, we include the agenda as part of that.
I like that.
Yeah.
So also what I'm hearing from you too then is just get rid of third quarter and always talk about it.
Third quarter in June and just, incorporate some language in there, tying it in with the budget.
Tying it
tying
in
with the budget
somewhere.
process.
Yeah.
Because
and
that's a
that
natural-
way we're talking about it in the budget process too. It doesn't tie us down to that third quarter.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I didn't have that answer, I just knew it bothered me.
Manager, I saw you thinking, manager.
Yeah.
I saw
Well-
you thinking.
I mean, if you really start reading the words, you're gonna need to, or we are gonna need to select, we'll just use the first one, select groups. Consultation with selected groups, we need to identify who those are. And you're gonna identify those groups, and then you're gonna hear from them during the balance of the next year. That just might present a logistical, what groups exist today and what's their schedule 12 months from now. It's your policy, you're the ones that have to follow it. You're gonna follow it with my implementation, I think. Because you're not gonna go out and probably find the futurists or those kind of folks. So I would almost suggest that consultations with selected groups in the ownership or other methods of gaining ownership input will be continuous and ongoing, period.
Thoughts?
That sounds good.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I like it.
I actually had
That's more what we have tended to do.
Right.
I had put some notes down just for final board member comment, kind of in regards to that. And potentially one way to achieve that is to ask our current other boards, Planning Commission, EDA, to put that on their agenda. Just whether it's a 2-second discussion or branches out into something, and then at the joint meeting, so they would maybe have a year to have this discussion on their agenda a couple of times. And then when we come to the joint meeting, they might have something to present.
They would have the discussion on,
Well, it's the ownership, reaching out to some of our current boards, like,
okay,
like you say, we'll say that all of our external boards, we ask them to put it on their agenda a couple of times through the year and let them decide how they do it. And then when we come to the joint meeting, if that discussion actually produced something, present. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But at least instead of asking them right there and there on the spot, because we moved it to this time of year, now are we really getting what we wanted? And I don't know that we really got what we wanted. I think we placed it in the right spot, but we're not really getting the information. So how do we maybe ask them to put it on their agenda when they have time?
I see.
and say, hey, we're asking your thoughts and opinions. Maybe one meeting they have none, maybe next meeting they have some. It just is kind of an appropriate. So when
Collect
it
that and
comes,
bring that to the joint meeting with
so
you.
the next joint meeting, they can say, hey, this is what we've talked about a couple of times through the year.
And I would agree with that, because I think when we had the joint meeting, it seemed to be a recap of the previous year.
Yeah.
This is everything that we've done, and it's great to hear, but
Yep.
you said there was not the forward-thinking mechanism, so that's a good point.
Yeah,
It would be awesome to have our planning commissioner, our EDA, or whomever come forward and say, you know, we had a discussion about light bulbs and how we feel light bulbs or whatever, and, you know, just give it to us on top of their year in review. That's a step.
And I agree, the intent of that March, April timing on the joint meeting was intentional, but we failed to communicate.
We failed to give them the opportunity, the
Yeah.
other boards the opportunity to discuss it through the year.
Right.
I just kind of thought,
That's right.
I thought about that at the joint meeting, and I thought
And they're an easy ownership. They're already invested in our
Exactly.
township. Yeah. All right, so where do we go from here to get off center? And my apologies to a certain degree, whenever I read through our policy governance, I'm always looking at how relevant it is today, and because most of this was written before our time. And it's supposed to be a living document, right? So do we want to make any changes here? What I've heard is more continuous. I think we can make a focus on it during budget process.
And I like what the manager has stated on his comments as well, on the one area as well. I like that.
So with that in mind, for us to be able to be in compliance, either we follow this or we change the language.
Change.
Well, here we are at the end of April, 4 months into the year, through the year, and that budgeted survey hasn't even been brought up. You know? So I don't know when that survey's even gonna go out. Maybe next year. I have no idea.
We're
So-
meeting on it in 2 weeks.
Well, I don't have forward agendas. I don't know this. I'm a board member, but I'm in the dark on this. I know it's in the budget. No idea when, once you start looking at questions or whatever, putting it together, that's gonna take a couple months, and a couple months to get it to print it, and then mail it out. So by the end of the year, maybe we'll mail it out, maybe we'll get results on it next year. Who knows? I don't know what the process is.
Once you get a better feel for that, manager, would you be willing to report back at that at some point? Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I assumed our organization was looking at it, but I didn't have timeline either, so.
Yeah.
But the best way is to ask.
Yes, sir.
All right, so can we simplify the language?
Yes.
Right, but the language changed, but then some of the other things we discussed, what's our thoughts on that?
I think they were all good thoughts. I think focus on the budget process. I think being intentional about preparing our boards for the joint meeting better.
So, but that would almost have to start, as soon as it could.
But take out those hard dates like June or third
Yeah,
quarter and
yeah.
stuff.
Right, yeah,
But incorporate that, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, is that something that staff will reach out to the respective chairs of the board to ask, or is that something that we should do, or?
I think we should communicate
We should,
what
okay,
we
Yeah,
want.
yeah.
okay.
Anybody feel like they want to take language changes on for a draft? I can-
I'll try it.
Really?
I'll do it.
You're awesome. I try, but English is my second language.
So would it be okay then, at my next planning commission meeting, to ask the chair?
I would wait until,
Okay,
the policy that
wait
we
till the
approved,
policies
yeah.
change, very good.
And then I'll just share kind of some versions via email and stuff. Is that okay? Or do you want to just define?
yeah, just don't get into debate.
Right,
via
right. No,
email.
no debate. Just, kind of, so I'll be very careful of that.
Very much appreciated.
Yeah.
Are we okay now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to beat up on policy governance, but it is our
I
main
think
tool,
we-
and the big thing is, for the next board, they've got a guide, right?
I think we moved the needle a little bit, so.
Well, that's a good thing.
That's the point.
All right, moving on then, the one I hope we're all excited about, item 11F on the agenda, review of ends, initial discussion. All I'll add is, and I'm curious what your expectations are, but my expectations were that we would talk and listen to each other, but probably not finish this particular agenda item until another session. But if we do, great. Because it's an important one. Mrs. Juldry, you've kind of been, in the past, our I don't want, for lack of a better term, arbitrator. This facilitator is a better word.
Yeah, that's good. Prefer that word.
Yeah, and you sent out the form that we had worked with a couple of years ago as something to go with. Do you have anything you want to say on this? Because otherwise, I'm thinking this is fairly free-form discussion.
Yep.
It is a free-form discussion. If, I think the board, with the exception possibly of trustee Smith, was here back in 2021, and we were at Jameson, and I spent a fair amount of time talking about definitions and terminology and you know what ends are and what they're not. Unless the board is interested in that, I didn't think I'd go through that again. There is a template that kind of captures the main pieces that you want to include in the language of the ends. And so I'm interested in hearing what you all have to say. Thank you.
Trustee Smith, I'm assuming that you're familiar enough with policy governance, you probably don't need definitions and all
No,
of
I
that.
don't. I guess, you know, being a part of this at the beginning, then not being a part of it, then coming back and having that fresh set of eyes and stuff looking to it. I just wonder, and this is just my own thought, is that they're just, not saying the 1.0 and you got the 6 major ends and stuff right there, but when you get into all the other sub parts, it just seems like it's too long, it's too wordy. And like Manager Stuhldreher said in the email or one of the other documents, you don't want to be so vague that it makes it hard for interpretation. But it just seems like some of these could be, they're already spoken in other parts. There seems to be maybe some minor duplications or just clarifications. It just seems like it may be easier for the manager and the staff to follow and get a more clear understanding if this was a little bit clearer and less wordy and full of, I don't want to say full of duplications, but there seems to be some duplications in this, and that maybe it could be reworded, or if not, some of these could be eliminated. I'm not saying that everything, is just my kind of thought that it just, you know, and I didn't bring up, I don't have specifics on here, but when I was just looking at it, just like, wait, that's mentioned this other area. And so that was just my initial thought when I reread this document when I came back. That's what kind of stuck out to me.
And I think just historically, how we got here is important. I mean, this was originally developed by a board in 2010, and it's evolved over that. Very few deletions, I think, probably have been made to this. So each board comes in, they say, well, we're going to add in 1.3.5, for example, safe and secure schools through intergovernmental efforts, because they felt that was important. And so it's evolved without some of that cleanup, I think, is what you're describing, if that's a reasonable way to put it.
Yeah.
And I do see some duplication as well, and I pointed some of that out. And you've alluded to that in the past, so I was already thinking that those terms because of your comments. I had a couple things I'd like to make sure were included, but I agree, if we, some of these, you can bring it from the ground level and raise it up a little bit so that it's broader concept, but not too vague, as you
Right.
put it.
And then that might allow the manager and the team to kind of have more discretion and more kind of being able to what the interpretation is on these ends too.
Well, I mean, the manager is the one interpreting these ends, period, right? Isn't
Yes.
he? Yeah, so I mean, however he wants to do that, that's cool. I would like to hear the specifics of what's duplicated, because these are all different ends that have different, aspects we're talking about. So I think some of that stuff needs to be repeated within those. But, I mean, if I'm amenable to it, I just wanna see what the examples are that we need to eliminate.
I mean, I think like 1.3.1, 1.3.41, 1.41, 1.3.4 are all very similar. Now, maybe they need to be where they are. I'm just saying that's where that's where I struggle, for whatever reason, I just struggled with the ends and I got stuck on stuff that. So maybe that's exactly where it needs to be, Connie, that's a good point. Maybe we could say the same thing better in one area that it still has the same effect.
And we should also look at it from a point of view, what are the citizens reading? We're seeing this all the time, but as a citizen reading this, does this make much sense to what they're expecting this board and the manager to do? So that's another thing. We have to look at it from the citizen's point of view as well.
That's one reason not to be too vague, right there. I mean, also the interpretation side, but, so it means something.
Yeah.
I would comment on the 1.3. That's where I saw some of the duplication. 1.3.1, 3, 4, and 5 all talk about certain safety. The first one being accessible routes for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorized vehicles. And then as we get into 1.4, it's again talking about walkability and bikeability, et cetera, et cetera. I really felt the safety one was kind of an itemized list, all really going after safety in all of our public areas. And to me, if I were to boil it down, I would say safe environments for all our public assets. That includes roads, sidewalks, pathways, facilities, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of how I looked at it.
And, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And 1.6.2, create a purchasing policy that includes a mechanism to encourage local purchase of goods and services within reasonable cost limits. Is that really something that should be in the board's ends, or should that be part of more of the purchasing policy type thing, where it's not, it just seems like, should we be dictating that from our end on this right here? And I just don't know.
Are you suggesting it be a policy versus an end?
Yes.
That's reasonable. And I think we added this one, and I may have been the driver behind it a little bit, because I think it's important to invest in our own township when we're
Yes.
able to with our tax dollars.
Right.
So I remember being part of this, but yeah, you're right, maybe more of a policy that,
Because that would be more something that would be on the manager to do, and it could be incorporated somewhere else. I don't know, financial activities or something related to that. Just, again, just throwing it out there.
let me ask the question, is that still important to this board?
Well, for me, and I know that you know that I complained a lot in the first year about how much we get charged by the local companies, and I don't think it's, like I said then, I don't think our residents go out and buy stuff at a local place that if it's 25% more, just because it's local. Some people do, But not everybody, and I don't think the majority do. That's why we have Sam's Club, and that's why we have Walmart. But we don't do that. We pay whatever dollar they decide it is and go to the local company to get it. So that's what our policy is.
And that's where I kind of struggle a little bit too, because on one hand, yes, it's a benefit to that business and the people that employs and the spin-off revenue, but you're costing the rest of the taxpayers
I
maybe a
know.
little bit more money. If the prices were equal, then yes, go with the local. But if there's an increase, you're helping that business, but at the expense of the overall taxpayers. That's where I've always kind of struggled with these types of policies. It just, I don't know. It just,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
kind
it-
of struggle with it.
It does say within reasonable cost limits, and I think the intent was if it's, 5% more locally.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say
Is it-
that.
Reasonable, so it allows room for interpretation.
It sure does, because
it
it's
does.
not 5%.
Well, that's where it says create a purchasing policy that
Yes, sir.
includes that. And I think we don't have necessarily a policy that says this is the limit. And if it's local, 5% might be worth it to taxpayers, because then,
Share shipping and
Yeah.
well,
if you're ordering
not even
from
just that, but
somewhere.
the jobs that you're investing into, you're paying a local company, that goes back into the township, right? That money gets reinvested locally. When the company gets money from the township, they go to the store and buy stuff here
Mhm.
with it. They pay their employees.
Well,
So there's
yeah.
a certain amount of return. And every dollar that goes into the economy, you get 2.5 back, right? 'Cause it's,
Mhm. Yeah.
Mr. Smith.
No, no, I'm just still thinking,
I just,
It's,
I'm a business owner. And I go where the price is right for me as a business owner to buy goods and services, and that's what I do. So that's all, that's all I'm gonna say on it. That's the last thing I'm gonna say on that.
it's just how far in the weeds do you get? Is it, what if this is part of a chain, but the profits go outside, and it's just, there's so many different nuances to the policy that it's like, okay, Walmart's located in the township, does that count? Or because it's corporate and all the money goes to Arkansas, does that count as being local or not? What's your definition of local in the township? Is it the physical presence of the building, or were there sole proprietorship, or is it their only business? So there's a lot of different angles and
That's a
things.
very good point.
To look
Yeah,
at.
I think policy has to have a lot of discretion from the purchaser.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes.
Yes, a
And
lot of
so,
discretion.
but just having this right
Well-
here, I just think it just
I
is
think the whole
restrict-
thing is in the weeds, honestly.
So.
Would it be beneficial to ask the manager how they go to business when they do that? So then if they're doing what we want, then that's what, this should either go away or be changed to what's being done. I think what's being done is what's being asked, but maybe it's better said from the manager so that we have a better understanding of how we want things to be worded.
I'm good.
Do you want to jump in?
One, if you were going to be talking about purchasing, I'd probably not have it in your ends, I'd have it in your section 2 somewhere,
Mhm.
limitations. Township will not operate without a purchasing policy. So I think it's in the wrong spot for one. And then it was added in July 21. So it's,
Yeah, I didn't think it was very far ago, right?
and then the discussion on local purchasing. You will need several meetings to work through that for the reasons you just talked about.
Would we need to, or if we just said, we'd like you to keep this in mind? Because we often have bids on something that will come in and there'll be 4 of them, and I always will look at where are they coming from, right? and price is obviously huge, but if all things being equal, if they're this close, I think, well, I got somebody here in the township versus somebody in New Orleans or in Canada. If I was the purchasing agent, I might decide to pay the 2% locally. But that's
Okay.
me.
From a professional administrative perspective, acknowledging that I've worked for local government, taxpayers, my whole career, if you want my honest answer, local purchasing policies are all that show.
I don't intend it to show where I'm coming from at least, but I
It gets
understand what you're
discussed
saying.
a lot.
Right.
It's, I know it, everybody, I've been through it, it's a mess. You implement it, and then you still have a mess, because now it's brought the other side of the equation up front and center when folks are not winning the bids, and we operate as a, most of the public wants us to operate as a business. Not a good word, but that's not operating in a business fashion. We're spending the taxpayers' money. This is my personal opinion, that we ought to just have a good procurement system, and as long as we don't even put price at the top. It's, can they do the work? Can they do it well? Do they have the staff to support whatever it is we're buying and whatever? And price is often, not often, but depending on what you're doing, it's not even the top thing. And then it gets all, let's say, complicated with the desire, and I'm saying this publicly, so, if anybody's watching, I'm gonna get an earful about it.
Yeah, right.
But I prefaced it with, if you want my personal professional opinion, that's what I think of local purchasing policies, for whatever it's worth.
Thank you for that. I mean, you could have a business owner that makes $1 million in profit, and we preferred that business because they were local, and they take that million, they go buy a lake house in Petoskey. That's not local. That's not local money being spent, So, I mean, I'm just saying, I think that you have to keep cost in mind when you're dealing with other people's money.
Actually, I think their process is already in place. I mean, I think they're doing what we would like them to do.
The reality is, and I think you've heard us say it, it's often in water and sewer work. We have recommended a higher bid because we were more comfortable dealing with that company,
Mm-hmm.
maybe because they're local, or they're at least closer, to the township, so that they can be responsive. The one thing that the local purchasing policy does not address, and sometimes people think they will, is sometimes a local purchasing policy or something similar can help the new business, the new kid on the block. How do they make a name for themselves? And you got the business starting in town, and how do they get on their feet? And you often see that in areas of specifically in minority-owned business, women-owned businesses. There's often policies about that. You're going to run into the same dynamic, though. I think if you're creating purchasing policies that are trying to address a segment of your owners, that makes more sense than trying to create purchasing policies that are, you know, this local, you know, one, two.
What do you
The
mean by-
haircut can't be very big, or you're just costing your taxpayers that much.
Yeah, what do you mean in what you just said, ownership versus policy? I'm not,
If you wanted to have a policy that was promoting minority-owned businesses or women-owned businesses, you would do that through a purchasing policy somehow.
It-
And that may make more sense from a policy perspective than just trying to award something, because it could be to the big company, trustee Bill's point, you know, they gotta,
And to that point, they have 8A certifications for minority and disadvantaged communities, ownerships and stuff like that. I think that's what you referred to. You also have the National Minority Suppliers Development Council, which has their list. So there are different mechanisms. If that was what I think Manager Stuhldreher was also saying, is that if you want to target groups, that was, you'd have to incorporate something like that in there, which the federal government does on that. They're big
Right.
8A. But I don't know if many locals do that, just because it's very difficult.
yeah, and I wasn't thinking along those lines. Anybody else feel strongly about wanting to remove this or keep it?
I'd
I think we
remove
just-
it.
I'd like to remove it too, I think it's silly.
My initial reaction today is to remove it, but I'd like to, if we're going to have another discussion, you know, maybe we can just think about it till the next meeting and then, you know,
Formalize that, okay?
yeah, because maybe,
So, like-
maybe we'll think of a reason, another reason why to maybe keep it. I don't know.
Are we doing the final ends discussion next meeting?
That's up to us.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, I think, when we think we're done, we're done.
Well, because the second meeting, I know trustee Smith is not.
I'm going to be gone the end of May,
In May.
End of May.
Mhm.
that last one.
Hopefully, we get a lot of input in tonight, at
Yes.
the very least, right? Okay, so 1.6.2 is potentially in the chopping block, so think about that. I did note, I'm looking at my notes here, 1.5.4, just a typo. It says increase us of alternative forms, it should be use. Second word in 1.5.4.
Yeah, I saw that too.
If I can jump in more, so we talked about the 1.3 as far as the potential of consolidating some of the safety and making that broader. Is that reasonable?
Yep.
Any objections to looking at that in that way?
Yeah, and I think even, you know, honestly, some of that stuff is like 1.3.1 and 1.4.1 are pretty close to being the same thing.
Yeah, the 1.4 exactly. I think it's in a different category, but it kind of talks about the same things.
And you could combine those two categories, in my opinion, really.
Or maybe just take 1.4.1 and combine it with the other three
Yeah.
and put it in wherever it would apply the most.
Mm-hmm.
Just so I'm clear what I heard, was a suggestion to combine at the top level, 3 and 4? Into safety and health?
Oh, okay.
But
That's a good idea.
I
kind of,
mean, that would be fine with me, because they're very similar.
Very similar.
yeah,
Maybe that's what I'm hearing, no one said it, but that's what I was kind of hearing from,
Those two
That's what I heard,
those
too.
two sections are pretty darn close.
in
So, yeah,
1.3 we have three subheadings that are similar.
yes.
3 out of the
Agreed.
5. And, yeah,
So what if we combine 3 and 4, top level 3 and 4, safety, just call it safety and health.
Yeah.
Simplify the safety language.
So if you take 1.3.3, 4, and 5, you could just put safety in parks, roads
All
and,
public
bu-
assets.
and schools,
Assets.
you know?
Yeah.
I mean, instead of those
Public,
three.
yeah,
All
Public,
public,
yeah.
all
Public,
all
yeah.
public assets,
Yeah.
period.
Exactly. Exactly, because we don't even,
Clean that up.
Okay. So with, let's segue then, if that's okay, into 1.4. Is there combinations there, or do these just get folded into the new 1.3?
2, 3, and 4 would probably, I don't know if you do anything different with those, but 1.4.1, like I said, there's 4 of them that are the same, so.
And-
well, 2 and 3 could just be combined, because you could just say drinking water and sewer.
Yeah.
It's the exact same statement. On
Yep.
1.4.
Mhm.
Yeah, the uniqueness about 1.4, I agree, trustee Bills, 1.4.4 and 1.4.1 is, it's encouraging that healthy lifestyle kind of thing.
Mhm.
So we can consolidate that.
Which to me is different than safe pathways, right?
Well, it is, and that's why there's so many sections, because they all
Yeah.
have one key word.
Right, safe pathways or safe roads, et cetera, is one thing. Creating an environment that we're encouraging healthy lifestyles and accessible to facilities, those types of things, that's a separate end from my perspective. Safety,
What?
it's just addressing the health perspective versus the safety.
It's fine with me. It doesn't matter. Honestly, it's
I
pretty.
think once we
it's
take
pretty
this and
wordy.
get it all in paper, it'll make a lot more sense when we
Okay.
see all the red lines and edits and stuff on it.
Mhm.
Now it's like we're all kind of visually trying
Yeah.
to place everything in there, and so I think maybe if we just kind of
Let me take a stab at it.
who wants to do that?
I'll take a stab at it.
Thank you,
I nominate
Supervisor
Supervisor
Milkey.
Milky.
I got a
Thank
bunch
you.
of notes if you want 'em.
I'd like to
that'd
nominate
be
you
great.
as the spearheader.
912 on
All
the
right,
video too.
And
I was
ju-
gonna use.
Yeah, all right. And just for clarity, we'll combine, number 3 will become safety and health, 5 and 6 move up to 4 and 5.
Yep.
And then we'll consolidate the safety ones that are currently 1.3, move up the ones that are 1.4, consolidate a couple of those, give it a try.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Perfect.
And then I had 2 other things. Okay, you mind if I go? Commerce. We don't have a lot there. We might be dropping 1.6.2, which then leaves us with 2 items. Controlled establishment of potentially undesirable businesses. I think the intention of that is, at least the way I interpret this, is smart growth. We follow the master plan.
Mm-hmm.
If a organization wants to build in the township, and it doesn't meet our plan, it doesn't meet our zoning, then do we really want it in our township, right?
Right.
There are communities that have put in big boxes and given up the farm to allow that to happen, and now those big boxes sit there empty and are paying virtually no tax. That might be an example of, you want to be careful what you wish for, right? That's kind of how I interpret some of this. Create a mechanism to increase dialogue with business community to ensure quality services are provided. Some of that is happening. What I feel is missing here maybe is, and I probably can't articulate this well, but I'm going to try, is as a township, our zoning, our master plan, all that ultimately ought to be geared towards encouraging that job creation, but not at the sacrifice of, say, the master plan, right? You have to do it with balance. But it's not stated as far as encouraging job creation and or business. We have a lot of business districts, right, in this township. Some are empty. How do we get businesses to come in? I don't know. I think it's the discussion we've had, do we have any roadblocks that get in the way of someone wanting to develop here or to make roots with a small business here? Again, I don't want to give concessions that aren't worth giving.
Well, I don't know that
Right.
I don't know we have the money to give concessions.
No, I'm not suggesting grants. A good example, though, would be the EDA has a grant program. In fact, we just had our first applicant for that. And the purpose of that grant program is to encourage monument signs, or maybe they want their facade improved, but they can't afford to do
Right.
it.
Yeah, I'm familiar
So-
with it.
Yeah, so, are there things we should just be looking at all opportunities all the time, that if there are things that we can do in our zoning code to make it better, again, don't want to sacrifice the purpose of the zoning code, but it's important to me that,
Okay, may I just say one thing here?
Absolutely.
I have a question. Doesn't planning and zoning do that? Or is this including them, or is this just board ends?
we shared the ends with all of our boards,
All of
because
our boards.
that's
Okay, okay.
a way we state our priorities as a board.
Okay,
And I'm not trying to say that we should give the farm away to encourage business. I'm just saying we should always be looking at ways to improve that, though. Working with MMDC is a good example of that.
well, I think Manager Stool Dryer was a perfect example of this last year when he reached out to several businesses to have a roundtable discussion.
Exactly,
You
I
know.
agree.
And that was like the epitome of that, which was great.
And I think that,
Just had another one this morning.
that's
That's
the,
excellent.
the
Thank you, sir.
1.6.3, create mechanism to increase dialogue with business community.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't want that to go away. I think that's
no,
important.
that's really.
No, and I'm not suggesting getting rid of that. I'm just, are ways to look at job creation important? I mean, Bandit coming here was enormous. And that was a lot of work with MMDC, and I'm assuming Rodney was probably pretty involved in that too. Just guessing.
Well, I think, MMDC does a lot.
They do. I just look at our commercial one and how important is that to this board? And are we missing ways to articulate what is important to this board regarding commerce?
How did you just say about job? Will you say that again?
I don't know.
I'm
if
sorry, I
can.
put me on the spot.
I don't know if I can. I mean, just encouraging job creation.
It's like walking that fine line between job creation and just letting them go wherever the heck they want type
Yeah.
thing. You know,
That's
and
why,
just-
that's why I say not at the expense of master plan, not at the
Yeah,
expense
yeah.
When you
of
talk about
creating zoning,
incentivizing,
but
not sacrificing anything. That's my point.
site plans don't have job creation within them, do they? They don't.
No, but someone might not come here because they don't like our site plan process.
No
And I'm not
kidding.
suggesting that's the case. But if the word gets out, they might stay away. They might decide to go to Claire. But if we have a friendly policy that they know that they're gonna be working with good staff, if that's the word on the street and we create that image,
Well, we already heard that. I don't think that is necessarily the word on the street.
But I like
I
the
would-
idea that it's on it's on our minds. I like the idea that maybe Manager Stool Dryer in his meetings may hear something and work with Mr. Nanny to review the site plan process, that maybe to improve it based on,
yeah, or we may hear something that a certain ordinance doesn't make sense anymore.
right.
And staff can review it and make recommendations and go, yeah, we're not changing that.
I mean,
because-
I think that's what's being done, which,
Right.
so is that something you'd like to have down there, or if they're doing that, some of the things that we're talking about, that's already being done, so.
Sometimes it's nice to formalize
Oh,
it as
no,
a priority.
I'm on
'Cause that's what
board.
the ends are for, and
Yeah,
that's,
no,
I think it's weeds.
I just think it's nice to acknowledge that they're doing it, and now we wanna put it down on our ends as well. I didn't quite say that quite right, but you know what I meant.
Clerk Cody, Trustee Brown, you got?
I,
Trustee Smith?
yeah, on the commercial side, I just was thinking of one thing. We have the initiative to draw these companies here to Union Township. Do we have any initiative to keep them here? Once they get here, what are we doing to make sure they're gonna stay here? We've heard of companies leaving. So I think maybe we need some assurance of, maybe we need to look at the future of, once we get them in here, let's keep them here. We've done the hard work of getting them here. Is there something we wanna look at, to make sure they stay here, to make sure they stay in Union Township?
Well, and
There's a
the-
reason they came, and there's also a reason they're gonna leave.
Right.
Let's not give them a reason to leave. Is there
Keep
something
the
we
door
can look
open
at?
if they want to expand.
Just throwing that out there. We got the initial on the commercial establishment end to get them in here. Maybe we need to look at, you know, the future of keeping them. Just throwing it out there, just an idea I had going through my head, that's all, sitting here listening.
Trustee Smith?
You know, I think.
I mean to put you on the spot, so.
No. I was thinking of just a lot of different things. I think at the end of the day, we got to remember that Manager Stuhldreher and his team are enforcing the policies and the ordinances that we've set in place. And so we got to acknowledge that if anybody of us or anybody's having, like, if there's any questions out there as far as the ordinance or the policies, ultimately they're enforcing what we're telling them to do. So then we need to also look at ourselves and just say, okay, are we putting them in an unfair position where they're having to enforce this policy, which is inhibiting growth, or it's, you know, whatever and stuff. So I'm kind of going off subject a little bit. I guess that was just the thing that I was thinking is, and I don't know if it belongs in here, but how do we ensure that we got to make sure that the correct ordinances and everything are in place, so what they're following is helping job growth without the expense of, you know, taking away all the spaces, or it's not smart growth and stuff like that. So that's what I was going through my mind, is how do we put that mumbo jumbo in writing? You know, because, you know, everybody's heard, oh, this and this and this and this. And it's like, are they following the ordinance? Are they following the policies? Well, yeah. Well, then it's not their fault. It's come and talk to us, because we're the ones that have set that. So
Yeah, but that's well put. Can I interrupt? I'm sorry.
no, please do.
I think it would be helpful, and maybe staff does this already, for the manager to come to us and say, hey, I think we can do something better here. Want to encourage that kind of behavior where they can come to the board,
Yeah.
planning commission, and say, we can improve this here. A good example was the solar array issue, where the planning commission changed the ordinance
Mm-hmm.
because
It was
there was a need.
It was
Yeah.
encouraged by, if I understand, the
Yeah.
business owner came forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Mr. Coyne, he was the actual one who started everything. It wasn't, you know,
I mean, they're the experts.
Yeah,
I guess they're the experts, whether it's, you know, community development, financial, or overall management. They're the experts. So if they've got a suggestion, we have to make sure that we're willing and ready to listen to what their suggestions are, and for what reasons.
And so from that light, again, I think it'd be nice to state, we want to encourage that type of reporting process.
Yes.
yes.
But how do we, without making it so lengthy and everything, you know? But I think we're all on the same page. It's just how do we?
Is this reasonable, I mean, as far as the desired outcome?
If we are hearing of things that have potential for change that could improve our township and the outcome, yeah,
Because we've asked this question quite a few times in this past year. Are we missing something? Because of complaints, right? Real or not, perceived complaints.
right.
And we want to know, are there really things in the way? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But we don't know how to always find out, right? With the
Right.
exception of Mr. Stuhldreher's
Yep.
taken the initiative with the companies lately, these organizations. And that's going to be, I hope, helpful.
And that could come right back to what I was just talking about, keeping them here.
Right.
Yes.
We're going out and touching base with them, saying, hey, what is it? What is it we got? What can we do?
I think we've got a really good idea that, yes. it's-
Communication though, like
How do we
Trustee
get it on
Smith,
paper?
what Trustee Smith is saying is that communication level. Communication's everything in this, and we would sure hope the manager would feel pretty comfortable to come to us and say, hey, guys, we need to take a look at this, staff,
Right.
or team, trustees, board, we need to take a look at this. I would hope the managers feel comfortable enough coming to us and doing that.
I think they do. My point was, let's articulate that as something important.
Yeah.
That way the
I'm-
community
yeah,
sees it as
for
well.
sure, absolutely.
I would actually like to-
I would agree with that.
We might be able to take a stab at some 1.6 language.
That'd be great.
That'd be, thank you.
And job creation, I used that before, and that's because I couldn't find other words. Job creation wasn't important to me. I think the general discussion is what I heard is could be
Economic
fleshed out
activity.
together. Yeah.
The job creation is an end product of something.
Yes.
It's not the front end.
Mhm.
So I knew it
Unless
wasn't
you're
the right
giving a
words.
flat incentive, if you're
What's-
giving money out to create jobs, then you're paying for the jobs.
You know, I'm thinking
I'm not
more
suggesting
of
that.
I don't wanna
No,
do that either.
No.
language that emphasizes the use of best practices in processes that's important to the developer community. And if it's said right, then it'll help protect the board. How can you argue with using the best practice in development and review processes?
Right.
Yeah.
And they do, in fact, exist. I wish I would hear more about things that were like ordinance related that we could change. I have heard, and you need to remember, there's a lot of stakeholders. And some are more effective than others in making their arguments. It's been communicated that it feels a lot different now, and this is, I think it's good, but it feels a lot different now than it did 5 or 7 years ago out there. The township feels, I don't know what you guys have done, but we don't like it. And we've noticed it in the last 7 years. And my response to that is often, I'm glad to hear that. That's executing the policies that the board has talked about, back to your point, because I need that kind of support. And, you know, love to talk about changes to ordinances. Those are kind of easy. It's, you know, I should be able to pick up the phone call and get it to pick up the phone because I'm out doing work in the field and I got a question and I want it answered, you know, because I picked up the phone and dialed it. And I don't know how you solve that one, but you know, I did not live here, I did not grow up here. I've heard from most of you about some of the chaos that existed prior to policy governance. And a lot of what I hear is what you all are not wanting. And, you know,
Would,
that's
and
just the way it goes.
when I know we're going down the route of the redevelopment ready communities, that whole process and stuff, that should go a long way in streamlining the process. So what we're discussing here about what is the developers, what everybody wants, basically everybody that, if I understand correctly, that if you're part of this program, you've adopted your system or everything like this to kind of have some conformity with what other locals are doing. So a developer comes in, they kind of know what to expect from that community, whether it's here or somewhere else. So there's some commonalities. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I mean.
So that'll
it-
help
it
a little
meets certain
bit.
standards, the certifications.
So that will help in somewhat with people and developers
And
with expectations.
I think a lot of the pushback we got, and it's only anecdotal data that I have, and I think that's the struggle we've had as a board, is this perception or is it real roadblocks, right? Is a lot of the complaints seem to be from those that have been in the community developing for a long time, and things have changed, period. But you get organizations coming from out of town, coming into Union Township, and the general comments are, you guys are easy to work with. We work with a lot of communities across the U.S. When I was in the planning commission, we'd have meetings with companies, and we were continually being praised by those outside developers. Anecdotally, that tells me that it's just the old timers here, they see the change, and that's hard.
I think it's important to hear their voice, though.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, I think Manager Stuhldreier's working on that, and I'm sure when appropriate, you would present something to us or
It's-
let us know at some point in time.
And it's one of our ends,
Yeah. Right.
create that dialogue. Trustee Brown.
Yeah, I am one of the old boys network from a long time ago here. That old boys network, I am so glad is gone. Thank you. From 5 to 7 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I built in this community, pulled permits out of this office. It was time for a change. So, from someone who has lived here all my life, has lived through the process here at Union Township for the last 30 years in business, that old boys network needed to go. It's made this township 100 times better, in my opinion. You were gonna get heat off what you said in the public, I'll get the heat from this. But I lived it, I've been through it, it's my honest opinion. I've lived here my entire life. I went through just what you were talking about. So, it is a better process, and it's a better community because of the governance and what we do.
And the reality is, it's a growing pain. I mean, this township
It
has
is.
grown, and that's a result of growth.
It is. And you're so used to doing the same thing. When I come in here, pull a building permit, go to Isabella Bank and Trust, get a loan, and have it in, you get the loan, you get it in 5 hours. You come in here, you pull the building permit in an hour, you shake all your buddies' hands, and you go on with it. That's the way it used to be, you know? Was it always, was it done right? Did we go and did we get inspected and do a good job and have good product and put a good product out in the community? Absolutely we did, you know? But the system is different. It isn't, I call it the Old Boys Network, but it was the Old Boys Network everywhere. It wasn't just in Union Township, you know? So I want to be careful there. It wasn't just localized here. It was everywhere I did business.
In the old days, the Old Boys Network was appropriate.
Yes,
Because you don't
absolutely.
need all this
A handshake was everything.
infrastructure when you have 1,000 or a couple thousand folks.
Yeah.
It's just,
We grew, it's growing pains, just
Yeah,
like you
it's
said, we
growth.
grew, and we grew rapidly. And you're right, the complaints that I did here were just what the supervisor said. It wasn't from the new companies coming in, the new companies I go and talk to. It was more of the old boy network that I was. I mean, I was one of those, you know, I'm not pointing any fingers, that was me, you know, so.
All right, so you're willing to take a stab at some language on that? Are we good with that?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on the ends? I'm kind of excited that we're looking at combining 3 and 4.
Me too.
Me three.
Any other? I only had one other thing is I'll lift up. We don't need to talk about it long, but there's nothing in here about elections, and I'm not sure it needs to be, but it was on my mind. And I would only think that's a subheading in, common good. But I'm not sure we need to say anything about it other than, to me, it's important that our clerk has the resources to run secure and elections.
In the ends,
I just wanted to bring up the
I mean,
point.
if that's, if that, I mean, I think it already is, but if that's the case, then you're gonna wanna say something about, tax collecting and many of the other things that happen as well.
that doesn't need to be in the ends.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up. I would state it as an important thing, and I didn't see how it necessarily fit. Thought I'd
That's
throw
a-
it out there.
It's a budget process though, isn't it?
Is it?
I think it is.
It's a direction to the organization to make sure that they're,
I mean, I think it's worth discussing the next time, you know what I mean?
well, think about it. If anybody wants to
Yeah.
talk about it, I will, but I'm not gonna push on it. Maybe our clerk has thoughts on that.
Not right now.
Not to put it on the spot. Okay. All right. Everyone, anything else on the ends? So
No,
we'll come back in the next meeting. So you're gone at the end of
The 24th, I believe.
Okay.
The last Wednesday of May. Fourth Wednesday.
I'm gonna try the 3 and 4 combination, and Mr. Stuhldreher is gonna do the 1.6, and then you're gonna think about,
The 3.4 agenda planning. That one, I think. you
yes,
asked
you're
me.
gonna do, and then think about 1.6.2, whether or not to keep that at all in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
Okay.
Does the board want the next discussion at your first meeting in May?
mm-hmm.
Ideally, what's the agenda looking like at this point?
And that would be the 10th,
No, but
May 10th.
Let's put it on, and if we've
Yeah.
got a full board,
I'll be-
or a
I'll be
full
here.
evening,
I'll
we'll
be
do a
here.
shorter discussion.
it's either May 10th or the first meeting in June.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah,
Either of
that's,
those would be
that's,
fine.
yeah.
try for the 10th, then. Okay, thank you. Moving on, item 12 on our agenda, extended public comment. Extended public comment is restricted to 5 minutes regarding any issue. If you choose to address the public, please state your name and address for the record. Seeing no one present, no one here virtually, let me open up at 9:38 p.m. And again, no one present. Extended public comment closes at 9:38 p.m. Mr. Stuhldreher, manager's comments.
Thank you. And just a couple things. The restrooms at the park were opened in the last week or two, so those are ready to go. The new assessor, Ms. Jill Peters, started this past Monday. We'll have her up in front of the board. We need to take some action to, so she's properly named our assessor of record. So you'll have a chance to meet her then. If you're around, stop in, say hello. She's in the same place that the assessor's always been in. The MRF report that the county had done on that facility, they created, their board created an ad hoc committee. We were invited to sit on that. I'm on it. We held our first meeting in the last couple of weeks. Plan is to meet monthly, and we're basically talking about how to implement the recommendations that are in that report. So that's ongoing. Want to mention the Care Store Drive. That's still ongoing till early May. We had some donations from Meyer that Trustee Bills helped us secure. And I think it's a lot of fun, it's ongoing, and I went down to the Care Store, maybe I've already told you this, I don't know, a couple weeks ago with two of the folks, and they run, that whole facility, if you haven't been in there, is pretty impressive. I mean, it really is. Whatever the service is, you know, the Clothing Inc. or the Care Store or any, whatever operations going on, they're all impressive. And then the last thing is, and this is not meant as, well, I'll just preface it with, this is what I heard. I have a weekly meeting with the city manager and the county administrator. And the meeting that Trustee Bills referred to, the Township Association, was brought up, and the county administrator indicated that it was a very good discussion. But I would characterize the likelihood of the county actually going down the direction of a millage increase is far from certain. And I might have misheard, but I don't want the residents, or particularly you, to be looked at as saying the county is doing this or that. I don't think they're quite there yet. And so I just wanted to have that clarification. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, the spring flushing, hydrant flushing started this week, and so that impacts all the residents. Ask for a little bit of patience if your water is a little discolored or something while that's going on.
Very good. Thank you. Final board member comment, item 14, Trustee Brown.
Oh, it's something simple today. We're getting out there doing our spring mowing, spring cleaning, spring cleanup, all that kind of stuff. Just remember, a lot of spring stuff hasn't woke up yet. So if you can leave your lawn, just go a little bit longer and let those baby rabbits and all that kind of stuff do their thing, be very helpful. And when you do go mow, don't mow it out into the road. Got a lot of motorcycle friends that seem to slide around when that hits their tires. So try to keep the grass shavings out of the road for us. Thank you.
Trustee Bills.
I had a couple things I forgot to mention about that MTA meeting. But one thing is that the county did come right out and say they are prepared to put that on this November's ballot for the public to make a decision. And that the townships pushed back on that and said they'd really, including me, and said, don't spend the money on a special election out of money you're asking for in addition to the money you already have. Try to do that at the presidential election when everybody's voting. You know, so that's what, because they're not having the deficit for another 4 years. So I wanted to just say that's before any of that other stuff happens. They have to get approval by the voters. And a lot of times special elections are only attended by people that are willing to pay the money. So just saying, I would prefer that it was a presidential election. The other thing is that the Maple Syrup Festival is this weekend in Shepherd. And so I hope everybody attends. And they're having the yard sales starting tomorrow, if you're a yard sailor. And that's all I got.
Thank
Oh,
you.
wait, I forgot something, but if I remember, I'm gonna do it later.
Just want to quickly thank the manager. I see that the meeting minutes for the Aquatic Center is now on the Mount Pleasant website.
Nice.
And so all last year and this year, so thank you for getting that
That's
taken care
awesome.
of.
That's awesome.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's nice. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Clerk Cody? Trustee Theron, and I'm going to preface it if you just want to talk about one thing. We had something that we thought would be on the agenda tonight, right? And we tabled it at the last meeting. And so I asked James if he might just introduce briefly what we've been talking about so that you have a chance to think about it prior to us meeting again. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I hope I have it down.
And you can do any other comments you want now too, but.
No, it's, so first of all, thank you for tabling that, because this is something I would like to be a part of. This board has had discussions about the office of the clerk, and I have talked to 2 other people from a previous board that had, and maybe it was just amongst themselves, but had talked to me about the office of the clerk and to help make it a stronger, give more support because of the current and new requirements. And I think in some of our discussions that we've had, we've talked about staffing, and that conversation, I believe, has happened. So that's something that we'll probably discuss. And then potential compensation, maybe in the form of a stipend based on the activity of the year. And so that would be something that could, from what I'm understanding or hearing, and I did listen to the last meeting, something that would not be policy, but it would be more of something like a yearly review. And I definitely support the idea of making, having that discussion so that we support the office of the clerk properly, because it has changed so much. So thanks for starting the conversation in regards to staffing, and look forward to the discussion
Can I say
in the
one
future
thing on
meeting.
that too?
Sure.
At the MTA meeting before, or no, after everybody left, and or maybe it was before, I can't remember, but one part of the meeting, before it was official, I asked if any of the clerks were there, because I don't know their names, and anyway, a few of them chimed in, because I told them that we were discussions about that, and we wanted to know what direction to take, and they said that the county has not decided whether they'll even help the outlying townships with that 9 days. And they also said that if they did, they would still require them to have 2 officials at every single day. So, and they would only have 1 person to tabulate, and then the county would have, or the township would have to be there on their own anyway. So this is gonna require a lot of resources for the state and federal, or is it just federal?
State.
State and federal
Yeah, federal.
elections, all of them. So, so that's something that's big, and nothing's been then really interpreted by the state according to these other clerks.
Yeah, we're all waiting still.
Yeah.
I
So,
think that's why it's important to have the yearly discussion to make sure that we are where we need to be. And that's, so hopefully
Yeah, did you have anything
got
else?
us in the ballpark. No, the only other thing was we kind of talked about the joint meeting, getting out to our outside boards of having discussions when appropriate, when they can, so as a step.
So we'll plan on having, at the next meeting then, board discussion then on the clerk's office.
yeah.
Great.
I only had one question for my final board member comment. We talked about the audit tonight. I know that's done. Do we have a timeline in which we should expect that presentation?
Next meeting.
Next meeting. Okay, so we might have a full meeting next time.
Nice. Maybe we'll stay 3 hours next time.
It's not common for us to be here till 10. So, and with that, I'm happy to entertain any motions for adjournment.
So move.
Support.
Motion by Smith, support by Thering. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Adjourned at 9:49. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, don't leave without.
I know, I'm not leaving.